Zara never thought she would rule anything, let alone an entire galaxy. Born different from other dragons, her scales shone white as freshly fallen snow, while her family and clan displayed the traditional deep emerald and gold that marked their ancient bloodline. The elders whispered behind closed doors that her pale appearance meant weakness, that she would never grow to full size or possess the fire that made dragons feared across the cosmos. They were wrong about everything except one thing. Zara was indeed different. On the remote planet of Drakmor, where crystal mountains touched purple skies and twin suns cast dancing shadows across vast silver lakes, Zara spent her youth learning to hide. Her mother, Queen Thessarian, ruled their world with iron claws and burning breath, but even she could not protect her daughter from the cruel words of other dragons. Young dragons would mock Zara's appearance, calling her Ghost Wing and Snow Scale, making her feel like an outsider in her own home. But Zara possessed something her tormentors lacked, an unquenchable hunger for knowledge, and an unusual gift that would change everything. While other young dragons practiced breathing fire and perfecting their aerial combat skills, Zara spent countless hours in the ancient libraries carved deep within Drakmor's crystal caves. She studied star maps, learned the languages of distant worlds, and discovered secrets about space travel that had been forgotten for thousands of years. The dusty scrolls and glowing data crystals became her closest companions, teaching her about civilizations that existed beyond their small corner of the universe. Everything changed on Zara's 20th birthday, which should have been a celebration of her coming of age. Instead, it became the day that revealed her true nature and set her on a path toward galactic domination. The ceremony took place in the Great Hall of Winds, a massive cavern where the air itself seemed to sing with ancient magic. Dragons from across Drakmor gathered to witness Zara's transformation into adulthood, though many came more out of curiosity than respect. They wanted to see if the pale princess would finally show some sign of the power that ran in royal blood. As tradition demanded, Zara stood before the Crystal of Awakening, a massive gem that glowed with inner fire and had been used for centuries to unlock the true potential of young dragons. Her mother watched with worried eyes, while her father, the massive King Draconis, maintained his usual stern expression that revealed nothing of his thoughts. The crystal began to pulse with warm light as Zara approached, but something unexpected happened. Instead of the usual golden glow that signaled the awakening of dragonfire, the crystal turned a brilliant silver white, matching the color of Zara's scales. The air around her began to shimmer and dance, and suddenly every dragon in the hall gasped in amazement and terror. Zara was not just breathing fire. She was breathing ice so cold it could freeze molten lava in an instant, and more importantly, she was breathing something else entirely. Streams of living energy poured from her mouth, energy that seemed to bend space itself. The power was unlike anything any dragon had ever seen, and it scared them. But fear turned to absolute terror when the Real surprise revealed itself. As Zara's new powers awakened, strange things began appearing on her white scales. At first, they looked like small gray spots, barely noticeable against her pale hide. But within hours, it became clear that these were not ordinary markings. They were barnacles. Living, breathing, space-dwelling barnacles that seemed to feed off Zara's incredible new energy. The Dragon Council immediately declared this an abomination, claiming that Zara had been cursed by dark forces from beyond their world. They demanded that King Draconis banish his daughter before her strange condition could somehow spread to other dragons. Some even suggested more drastic measures, whispering that she should be destroyed before whatever force had infected her could use her as a gateway to their realm. Zara's mother wept openly, but her father remained silent for 3 full days, thinking deeply about what should be done. During this time, Zara discovered that the barnacles were not parasites as everyone believed. They were something far more extraordinary and terrifying. The barnacles could speak to her, not with voices that others could hear, but through thoughts that appeared directly in her mind. They told her incredible stories about the vast emptiness between stars, about ancient civilizations that had risen and fallen while her people were still learning to fly, and most importantly, about technology that could allow someone to travel instantly between distant worlds. More disturbing still, the Barnacles revealed that they had been waiting for her specifically. They had crossed impossible distances and survived in the cold void of space for thousands of years, all because they had seen visions of a white dragon who would help them reclaim something that had been stolen from them long ago. They called it the Heart of Stars, a device created by their ancestors that could control the movement of entire solar systems. According to their memories, it had been broken into 7 pieces and scattered across the galaxy by an ancient enemy who feared their power. The Barnacles believed that Zara, with her unique abilities and their guidance, could find these pieces and rebuild the device. In return, they offered her something no dragon had ever possessed: the power to rule not just a single world, but every inhabited planet in the galaxy. When Zara finally emerged from 3 days of constant communication with her strange new companions, she had made her decision. She would not beg for acceptance from dragons who could never understand her true nature. Instead, she would leave Drakmor forever and begin a quest that would either destroy her or make her the most powerful being in known space. Her parents tried to stop her, offering to fight the council and protect her from those who wanted to see her destroyed. But Zara knew that staying would only bring suffering to everyone she loved. The Barnacles had shown her glimpses of the future, and she understood that her destiny lay among the stars, not in the familiar comfort of her childhood home. On a night when both moons were dark and the crystal mountains sang their ancient lullabies, Zara spread her wings and flew higher than any dragon ever had before. The barnacles covering her scales began to glow with soft blue light, creating some kind of protective field around her body that allowed her to survive in the airless void between worlds. Her first destination was the trading station at Zirian Prime, a massive space platform where beings from hundreds of different worlds came to buy and sell everything from rare minerals to forbidden weapons. The Barnacles had told her that the first piece of the Heart of Stars was hidden somewhere in the station's vast lower levels, guarded by creatures that most beings wouldn't dare to face. But Zara was no longer just a dragon. She was something new and strange, and she was about to discover just how powerful that made her. The journey to Zirian Prime took several days, during which Zara learned to control her new abilities. The ice breath that had surprised everyone at her awakening ceremony was actually the least impressive of her new powers. The Barnacles taught her to manipulate the strange energy that flowed through her body, allowing her to become invisible to most sensors, move through solid matter when necessary, and, most amazingly, communicate directly with the computer systems that controlled space stations and starships. When she finally arrived at Zirian Prime, Zara looked nothing like the uncertain young dragon who had left Drakmor. The barnacles had grown larger and more numerous, creating intricate patterns across her scales that seemed to shift and change in the artificial light of the station's docking bays. Other travelers backed away from her in fear and wonder, unable to understand what they were seeing, but instinctively recognizing that she represented something entirely new and potentially dangerous. Zara registered at the station as a freelance treasure hunter, a common enough profession that her presence wouldn't attract too much attention from the authorities. She rented a small quarters in the middle levels and began planning her first real mission as a seeker of the Heart of Stars. The Barnacles had shown her images of the device fragment they sought, a crystalline structure about the size of her claw that pulsed with the same silver-white energy that flowed through her own body. According to their ancient memories, it was hidden in a section of the station that had been sealed off after an accident many years ago, an area now inhabited by energy-feeding creatures that had evolved in the radioactive environment. Most beings would have considered such a mission impossible, but Zara was beginning to understand that impossible was just another word for something that hadn't been tried by the right person yet. She spent a week studying the station's layout and learning about its history. Zirian Prime had originally been built around the wreckage of an enormous alien ship that had been discovered drifting in space centuries ago. Nobody knew what species had built the ship or what had happened to its crew, but the technology inside had been so advanced that it took generations of scientists to understand even small portions of it. The accident that had sealed off the lower levels had occurred when researchers tried to activate something they didn't fully comprehend. The resulting energy explosion had killed dozens of people and created a zone where normal laws of physics seemed to work differently. Strange creatures had been spotted in the affected areas, beings made of pure energy that could drain the life force from any living thing they encountered. Perfect conditions for hiding something as powerful as a fragment of the heart of stars. Zara's plan was simple in concept, but incredibly dangerous in execution. She would use her new abilities to sneak into the restricted areas, locate the fragment, and escape before the station's security forces could stop her. The Barnacles would help her navigate the chaotic energy fields that had driven away previous explorers, and her natural dragon toughness would protect her from most physical dangers. What she didn't expect was to discover that she wasn't the only one searching for the same prize. On the night she planned to begin her infiltration, Zara detected an unusual energy signature coming from the sealed sections of the station. Using abilities she was still learning to control, she extended her consciousness through the station's computer networks and discovered that someone else was already down there, moving through the dangerous areas with confidence that suggested they knew exactly what they were looking for. The intruder's energy pattern was unlike anything she had encountered before. Not quite human, not quite alien, but something that seemed to exist in the space between different forms of life. Whoever or whatever it was, they possessed technology that allowed them to move through the hazardous environment as easily as she could. This changed everything. If someone else found a fragment first, her quest would be over before it truly began. The Barnacles became agitated when she shared this information with them, their thoughts filling her mind with urgent warnings about the dangers of allowing the heart of stars to fall into the wrong hands. Zara made a decision that would have seemed impossible to her just weeks earlier. Instead of waiting and planning, she would go immediately to confront this unknown competitor. If they were after the same thing she was, then only one of them would leave Zirian Prime with the prize. She armed herself with a plasma rifle and several other weapons she had purchased from station dealers, though she suspected her natural abilities would prove more useful than any artificial tools. The barnacles covering her scales began to pulse with anticipation, their alien thoughts mixing with her own determination to create a sense of purpose stronger than anything she had ever felt. As Zara made her way toward the restricted access tunnels that would take her into the station's dangerous heart, she had no idea that she was about to encounter someone who would change not just her mission, but her entire understanding of what it meant to be powerful in a galaxy full of wonders and terrors beyond imagination. The first fragment of the Heart of Stars was waiting somewhere in the darkness below, but so was a mystery that would challenge everything the Barnacles had told her about their ancient quest. Zara was about to discover that some secrets are worth more than the power to rule galaxies, and some enemies become the most unexpected allies. Her transformation from outcast dragon princess to galactic force was only just beginning. The tunnels beneath Zirian Prime felt like descending into the belly of some enormous sleeping beast. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows on walls that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm, and the air itself buzzed with energy that made Zara's barnacles glow brighter with each step she took deeper into the restricted zone. She had been moving through the maintenance passages for almost an hour when she first heard the sound that stopped her cold. Music. Not the harsh mechanical noises she expected from damaged equipment, but actual music, soft and haunting, drifting through the twisted metal corridors like a ghost from another time. The barnacles on her scales began to vibrate with excitement, their whispered thoughts telling her that this was no coincidence. According to their ancient memories, the fragments of the heart of stars called to each other across vast distances, and sometimes this call took the form of sounds that could drive lesser beings mad with longing. But this music felt different. It wasn't the alien harmonies the Barnacles had described, but something strangely familiar, almost like the lullabies her mother used to sing when Zara was a young dragon afraid of the dark. Someone was down there in the dangerous depths of the station, and whoever it was knew songs from her world. Zara moved more carefully now, using her new abilities to bend light around her body until she became nearly invisible. The plasma rifle felt reassuring in her claws, but she kept it lowered as she followed the music deeper into the maze of damaged corridors and sealed chambers that made up the station's forbidden heart. The song led her to a vast chamber that had once been part of the alien ship around which Zirian Prime had been built. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing with the same silver-white energy that flowed through her own body, and in the center of the room stood something that took her breath away. It was a tree, not a normal tree, but something that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, its branches reaching toward a ceiling that showed not metal and cables, but an impossible view of the galaxy itself. Stars wheeled slowly overhead, and Zara could see distant nebulae and cosmic phenomena that should have been thousands of light years away. Sitting beneath the tree, with his back turned toward her, was the source of the music. He appeared to be human, though something about his proportions suggested that assumption might be wrong. His hair was black as the space between stars, and when he moved, Zara caught glimpses of skin that seemed to shimmer with the same inner light she had seen in the tree's branches. He was playing an instrument she didn't recognize, something that looked like a cross between a flute and a small harp, and the sounds it produced made her heart ache with homesickness for a world she had chosen to leave behind forever. But what made Zara's breath catch in her throat was what she saw growing on his exposed arms and neck. Barnacles. Not the space-dwelling creatures that covered her own scales, but something similar, something that pulsed with the same alien intelligence she had learned to communicate with. He finished his song and spoke without turning around, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that comes from someone who has never needed to shout to be heard. "You can stop hiding now, Zara of Drakmor. I've been waiting for you to arrive." The casual use of her name and the mention of her home world sent alarm signals racing through her mind. She stepped out of the shadows, keeping her weapon ready but not directly threatening, and demanded answers in the most commanding voice she could manage. "Who are you? How do you know my name? And what are you doing with a fragment of the Heart of Stars?" He turned around slowly, and Zara found herself looking into eyes that held the depth and mystery of ancient oceans. His face was indeed human in its basic structure, but there were subtle differences that suggested mixed heritage from species she couldn't identify. When he smiled, she noticed that his teeth were slightly pointed, and the barnacles covering his arms seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "My name is Kale," he said simply. "As for how I know you, the answer is more complicated than you might expect. The barnacles that chose you are cousins to the ones that chose me many years ago. We've been watching your progress with great interest." This revelation hit Zara like a physical blow. The barnacles covering her scales had led her to believe that she was unique, that she was the only being in the galaxy capable of finding and reassembling the Heart of Stars. The possibility that others existed who shared her strange abilities changed everything about her mission and her understanding of what she had become. "You're lying," she said, though even as the words left her mouth, she could feel the excitement radiating from her own barnacles. They were communicating with Kale's companions in ways she couldn't fully perceive, sharing information and memories at speeds that made her head spin. Kale gestured toward the crystalline tree, and Zara saw something that made her gasp in wonder and dismay. Nestled among the roots, glowing with the same energy that had called to her across space, was not one but 3 fragments of the Heart of Stars. I've been collecting them for longer than you've been alive, Kale explained. But I discovered something that your barnacles probably haven't told you yet. The Heart of Stars wasn't created to grant power over the galaxy. It was built as a prison. The words hit Zara like a splash of ice water, and she felt her barnacles recoil from the implications of what Kale was suggesting. According to everything they had shared with her, the Heart of Stars was a tool of creation and control, something that would allow its user to reshape the galaxy according to their will. The idea that it might have been designed for the opposite purpose was almost impossible to process. "You're wrong," she insisted. "The barnacles showed me visions of what the device could do. I've seen entire solar systems moved by its power." Kale nodded sadly. "Yes, it can do those things. But ask yourself this: why would a civilization advanced enough to build such a device choose to scatter its pieces across the galaxy? Why hide them in dangerous places guarded by creatures that most beings wouldn't dare to face?" The question struck at the heart of doubts that Zara had been trying to ignore ever since beginning her quest. The Barnacles had been eager to share stories about the Heart of Stars' incredible power, but they had been strangely vague about the details of why it had been broken apart and hidden. She had assumed it was because their ancient enemies had feared its constructive potential, but Kale's suggestion opened up much darker possibilities. "What do you think it was really meant to contain?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to hear the answer. Kale stood up and walked closer to the tree, his movements careful and reverent. Something that was powerful enough to threaten entire galaxies. Something that the builders of the heart knew would eventually escape any conventional prison. They created a device that could trap it between dimensions, in a space where it could exist, but never truly influence the physical universe. He paused and looked directly at her, his ancient eyes full of a sadness that spoke of terrible knowledge gained through experience. "The barnacles that chose us aren't just seeking to rebuild the Heart of Stars, Zura. They're trying to free whatever was locked away inside it. And they're using us to do it, because we're the only ones capable of surviving the process." The implications of this revelation were staggering. If Kale was telling the truth, then her quest to gather the fragments wasn't a heroic journey toward ultimate power, but an unwitting march toward unleashing something that could destroy everything she had ever known or cared about. The barnacles covering her scales seemed to sense her growing doubts, and their whispered thoughts became more urgent, more insistent, filling her mind with images of the glory and authority that would be hers once the Heart of Stars was complete. But for the first time since bonding with them, Zara found herself questioning whether their visions showed the future they claimed, or simply what they thought she wanted to see. "How do you know all this?" she demanded. "What proof do you have that the barnacles are lying?" Instead of answering directly, Kale touched one of the fragments nestled among the tree's roots. The crystal began to pulse with brilliant light, and suddenly the air around them filled with images that took Zara's breath away. She saw a galaxy teeming with life, billions of worlds where countless species had built civilizations that spanned star systems and created wonders that defied imagination. But then something appeared at the edges of the vision, a darkness that seemed to devour light itself, spreading from galaxy to galaxy like a cancer that consumed everything in its path. The darkness wasn't empty space or the absence of matter. It was something actively malevolent, something that fed on the energy of living beings and grew stronger with each world it destroyed. Entire civilizations vanished in moments as this cosmic predator swept through their space, leaving behind empty systems where once millions of beings had lived and loved and dreamed. And at the heart of the darkness, Zara saw something that made her blood freeze with terror. It was a consciousness, ancient beyond measure and hungry for experiences it could never truly have. It had once been a living being, but eons of existence had transformed it into something that could only feed on the life force of others, growing larger and more powerful with each civilization it devoured. The builders of the Heart of Stars had been among the last to face this cosmic predator, and they had made the ultimate sacrifice to stop it. Instead of trying to destroy something that might be truly immortal, they had created a prison that would hold it forever, trapping it in a space between dimensions where it could rage and hunger, but never again touch the physical universe. The fragments of the heart of stars weren't pieces of a tool for conquest. They were the keys to the most important prison ever built. The Barnacles survived the disaster because they were in space when their civilization fell, Kale explained as the visions faded. But they weren't innocent bystanders. They were servants of the thing that was imprisoned, and they've spent thousands of years searching for a way to free their master. Zara felt sick as the implications of what she had learned settled in her mind. Everything the Barnacles had told her was technically true, but they had twisted the truth to hide their real purpose. The Heart of Stars would indeed grant its user incredible power, but only because that power would come from an entity that had devoured entire galaxies. "Why didn't you try to stop me from collecting the fragments?" she asked. "If you knew what I was really doing, why let me continue?" Kale's expression grew even sadder. "Because I needed you to make the choice yourself." The Barnacles' influence grows stronger as their host gets closer to completing the Heart of Stars. "If I had simply told you the truth from the beginning, they might have been able to override your free will and force you to continue the quest anyway." He gestured toward the fragments glowing beneath the crystalline tree. "But now that you know the truth, you have a real choice to make. We can work together to find a way to destroy the fragments permanently, ending the possibility that anyone will ever be able to free the entity imprisoned within the Heart of Stars. Or you can listen to the Barnacles and help them complete their ancient mission, knowing full well what the consequences will be." As if responding to the threat Kale represented, the Barnacles covering Zara's scales began to glow more brightly, and their mental voices became a roar of anger and desperate pleading. They showed her new visions, images of herself as the ruler of all known space, commanding fleets of starships, and making decisions that would affect the lives of trillions of beings. They promised her everything she had ever dreamed of, and powers that would make her the equal of gods. But underneath their promises, Zara could now sense something else. The hunger of their imprisoned master, reaching across dimensions to touch her mind with visions of cosmic destruction that it presented as glorious conquest. The entity trapped within the Heart of Stars was indeed powerful beyond imagination, but its power came from consuming the life force of others, and it would never be satisfied as long as anything remained alive in the universe. The choice before her was clear, but it was also the most difficult decision she had ever faced. The Barnacles had become part of her in ways that went deeper than mere symbiosis, and rejecting their mission would mean losing abilities that had already become essential to her sense of self. More importantly, it would mean giving up the dream of ultimate power that had sustained her through months of dangerous quests across hostile space. But the alternative was to become the instrument of destruction for every living being in the galaxy, including everyone she had ever known or loved on distant Drakmor. "How do we destroy the fragments?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale smiled for the first time since she had met him, and the expression transformed his features from merely handsome to genuinely radiant. "That's the really interesting part. According to my research, the Heart of Stars can only be unmade by someone who possesses both the power to complete it and the will to refuse that completion. The builders designed it that way intentionally, ensuring that their prison could only be dismantled by someone who truly understood what was at stake." The Barnacles covering Zara's scales began to pulse frantically, their mental voices rising to a shriek of panic and rage. They showed her images of what her life would be like without their gifts. Just another dragon in a galaxy full of wonders she could never touch or understand. They reminded her of the mockery she had endured on Drakmor, the way others had looked at her with pity and disdain because of her unusual appearance. But for every image of weakness and isolation they projected, Zara found herself remembering something else, The quiet satisfaction of solving difficult problems through study and careful thought, the joy of discovery that came from understanding something new about the universe, and, most importantly, the look of love and pride in her mother's eyes when she had achieved something through her own efforts rather than borrowed power. "What will happen to us," she asked, "if we destroy the fragments? What becomes of the barnacles?" Kale's expression grew thoughtful. "I'm not entirely sure. They might die, or they might simply return to whatever form of existence they had before bonding with us. But I do know that we'll survive the process. The bond they created with us goes both ways. They need us as much as we've come to need them." This was the final piece of information Zara needed to make her decision. The barnacles had made themselves essential to her, but they were not actually part of her. They were separate beings with their own agenda, and while that agenda had given her incredible abilities, it had also made her a tool for purposes she could never support. "Then, let's end this," she said firmly. "Show me what we need to do." The process of unmaking the Heart of Stars was unlike anything Zara had ever experienced. Working together, she and Kale combined their abilities to create a resonance field that would cause the fragments to vibrate at frequencies that would tear apart the bonds holding them together at the molecular level. It required precise timing and absolute concentration, and any mistake would likely kill them both while accomplishing nothing. As they worked, the barnacles covering both their bodies began to change. The alien creatures seemed to realize what was happening, and their panic turned to pure fury. They tried to override their host's motor control, to force Zara and Kale to stop before the fragments could be destroyed, but the combination of human determination and draconic stubbornness proved stronger than their desperation. The fragments began to crack and splinter, their crystalline structure breaking down as the energy that held them together was systematically disrupted. With each piece that dissolved, Zara felt parts of her enhanced abilities disappearing. But she also felt something else, a growing sense of freedom that was worth more than all the cosmic power in the universe. When the last fragment crumbled into glowing dust that faded into nothingness, the barnacles covering her scales released their grip and fell away like autumn leaves. She expected to feel diminished, weakened by the loss of abilities that had become central to her identity, but instead she felt more like herself than she had since the day of her awakening ceremony. Kale was experiencing the same transformation, his borrowed abilities fading as the alien creatures that had given them to him finally accepted defeat. But unlike Zara, he had been living with the knowledge of what he was really doing for years, and the relief on his face was unmistakable. "It's over," he said quietly. "The prison will hold for as long as the universe exists, and no one will ever again be tempted to open it." Zara looked around the strange chamber where they had just prevented a cosmic catastrophe, noting that the crystalline tree was beginning to fade now that its purpose had been fulfilled. Soon this place would become just another damaged section of an old space station, and no one would ever know what had happened here. "What happens now?" she asked. "Where do we go from here?" Kale stood up and stretched, looking suddenly much younger despite the ancient wisdom in his eyes. "Wherever we want. The galaxy is still full of wonders and mysteries, and now we're free to explore them for our own reasons rather than serving the agenda of alien puppeteers." He paused and looked at her with an expression that was part invitation and part challenge. "Unless you prefer to return to Drakmore and try to convince your family that you've changed." The suggestion made Zara laugh, a sound of genuine amusement that echoed strangely in the fading chamber. "I think they might notice that I'm missing my barnacles. And besides, I've gotten used to being somewhere else." As they prepared to leave Zirian Prime and begin new lives free from the manipulation of cosmic parasites, Zara realized that her quest for ultimate power had taught her something far more valuable. True strength didn't come from abilities borrowed from others or weapons that could reshape reality. It came from understanding who you really were and having the courage to make choices based on that understanding, even when those choices cost you everything you thought you wanted. The galaxy was still vast and full of dangers, but for the first time in her life, Zara was free to face those challenges as herself rather than as a tool in someone else's plan. It was a different kind of power than what the Barnacles had offered, but it was entirely her own, and that, she discovered, was worth more than ruling the entire universe. 6 months had passed since the destruction of the Heart of Stars fragments, and Zara's life had taken directions she could never have imagined. Free from the influence of the Barnacles and their cosmic agenda, she and Kale had become partners in a much different kind of adventure, one where they chose their own destinations and defined their own purposes. Their first stop after leaving Zirian Prime had been the academic world of Luminous, where vast libraries had contained knowledge gathered from thousands of civilizations across the galaxy. Zara threw herself into research with the same intensity she had once devoted to hunting fragments of an alien weapon, but now her studies focused on understanding the universe for its own sake rather than as a means to power. She discovered that her natural dragon abilities, while no longer enhanced by alien symbionts, were still far beyond what most beings possessed. Her ice breath could freeze matter to temperatures near absolute zero, useful for preserving ancient artifacts and creating laboratory conditions impossible to achieve through conventional technology. More importantly, her enhanced intellect and perfect memory made her an ideal scholar, capable of absorbing and connecting information from dozens of different fields of study. Kale proved to be an equally capable research partner, though his interests lay in different areas. While Zara focused on the hard sciences of physics and astronomy, he delved into the histories and cultures of species that had vanished long before humans or dragons had learned to travel between stars. Together, they began to piece together a picture of galactic civilization that was far more complex and ancient than most people realized. Their partnership might have remained purely academic, if not for the discovery that changed everything once again. Deep in the archives of Luminous, buried among records that most scholars considered too fragmentary to be useful, Zara found references to something called the Echo Network. According to the scattered documents she pieced together, this had been a communication system that once connected thousands of worlds across multiple galaxies, allowing near-instantaneous transmission of information across distances that normally required centuries for even light to travel. The network had supposedly been destroyed in the same cosmic disaster that had led to the creation of the Heart of Stars, but Zara's research suggested that some components might still exist, hidden in the ruins of abandoned worlds or floating derelict in the space between stars. Think about what this could mean, she explained to Kale as they studied star charts in their shared laboratory. If even part of the Echo Network survived, we could re-establish contact with civilizations that we don't even know exist. The galaxy might not be as empty as everyone believes. Kale was more cautious, as he had learned to be after years of dealing with artifacts that carried hidden dangers. The same disaster that destroyed the network also led to the imprisonment of something that wanted to devour all life in the universe. Are we sure we want to start activating ancient technology that might have connections to that era? It was a fair question, and one that Zara had been wrestling with ever since making her discovery. The rational part of her mind agreed that anything connected to the civilization that had built the Heart of Stars should be approached with extreme caution. But another part of her, the part that had always been driven by curiosity and the desire to understand the unknown, couldn't resist the possibility of making contact with beings who might have knowledge that could benefit everyone. Their debate was settled when they received an unexpected visitor. Commander Sarachan of the Galactic Exploration Service arrived at Luminous aboard a military transport that looked like it had seen better decades. She was a small, intense woman whose eyes held the kind of weariness that comes from dealing with problems that have no good solutions, and she brought news that made their theoretical discussions suddenly very practical. "We've been monitoring deep space communications for the past month," she explained during their first meeting in Zara's laboratory. 3 weeks ago, our listening post started picking up signals that don't match any known transmission protocols. The signals appear to be coming from the direction of the void reaches, but that's impossible because nothing has ever been found alive out there. The void reaches were exactly what their name suggested, a vast region of space where no stars shone and no planets had ever been detected. Most spacefaring civilizations considered it the edge of the known universe, a boundary that marked the limits of exploration and discovery. The idea that signals were coming from that direction was disturbing enough, but what Commander Chun told them next was even more unsettling. Yesterday, one of our deep space scouts detected something emerging from the void reaches. It's artificial, definitely constructed by some form of intelligence, and it's heading toward inhabited systems at a speed that should be physically impossible. She activated a holographic display that showed a star chart with a bright red dot moving along a trajectory that would bring it into contact with several major worlds within a matter of weeks. The object appeared to be roughly the size of a small moon, but its energy signature was unlike anything in the databases of any known civilization. We need experts in ancient technologies, Chin continued. People who understand artifacts from civilizations that predate our current interstellar community. Your names came up as the only beings in this sector who have successfully dealt with this kind of situation. Zura and Kale exchanged glances, both of them thinking about the same thing. Their experience with the Heart of Stars had taught them that ancient artifacts were rarely as straightforward as they appeared, and something emerging from unexplored space could represent either a tremendous opportunity or a catastrophic threat. What do you want us to do? Kale asked. Join the investigation team, Chen replied. Help us figure out what this thing is and whether it represents a danger to inhabited worlds. You'd be working alongside specialists from a dozen different species, but you two have actually succeeded in understanding alien technology that others couldn't even identify. The offer was tempting, but Zara found herself hesitating. The peaceful months of research and discovery on Luminous had been some of the happiest of her life, and part of her was reluctant to return to the dangerous uncertainty that seemed to follow ancient mysteries. She had finally found a place where her unusual nature was seen as an asset rather than a burden, and the academic community had accepted her completely despite her strange appearance and dramatic history. But another part of her, the part that had always been drawn to the unknown, was already imagining what they might find when they caught up with the mysterious object. If it really was some kind of artifact from a previously unknown civilization, studying it could advance their understanding of galactic history by centuries. And if it posed a threat to inhabited worlds, then people with her and Kale's experience might be the only ones capable of finding a solution. We'll need access to all your data on the object, she said finally. And we want to review the personnel files for everyone else on the investigation team. If we're going to trust our lives to strangers, we need to know what we're working with. Chen smiled for the first time since arriving, an expression that made her look years younger. Already prepared, she said, producing a data crystal that contained more information than most people saw in a lifetime of military service. The ship departs for the interception point tomorrow morning. Will you be ready? That night, as Zara and Kale reviewed the mission files in their laboratory, they discussed the decision they had just made and what it might mean for the peaceful life they had been building together. Are we making the same mistake again? Kale wondered aloud, chasing after another ancient mystery that might turn out to be more dangerous than we can handle. Zara considered the question seriously before answering. I don't think so. This time we're going in with our eyes open, as partners in an investigation rather than tools being manipulated by alien parasites. And if we discover that the object represents a genuine threat, we'll have the resources of the Galactic Exploration Service to help us deal with it. She paused and looked at the star charts showing the object's trajectory. Besides, someone needs to investigate this thing, and we really might be the best qualified people for the job. Our experience with the Heart of Stars taught us things about ancient technology that no one else knows. The next morning found them aboard the GS Horizon, a ship designed specifically for long-range exploration and equipped with the most advanced sensors and analysis equipment available. The crew was a mixture of humans, dragons, and several other species that Zara had only read about in academic journals, all of them specialists in fields ranging from xenoarchaeology to theoretical physics. Captain Maria Santos, a veteran explorer who had spent decades investigating the ruins of dead civilizations, briefed the team during their first day of travel toward the interception point. The object appears to be some kind of massive spacecraft, though its design doesn't match anything in our databases, she explained, using holographic displays to show them detailed scans of their target. It's approximately 15 kilometers in diameter and appears to be constructed from materials we can't identify. Most importantly, it's transmitting constantly, broadcasting the same signal over and over. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's communications specialist, took over the presentation. We've been analyzing the transmission for weeks, but we can't decode it using any known languages or mathematical systems. The signal structure suggests it might be some kind of automated message, possibly a greeting or an identification beacon. Zara studied the visual representation of the signal pattern, noting similarities to mathematical sequences she had encountered in her research on ancient civilizations. Has anyone tried treating it as a historical language rather than a contemporary one? She asked. Some of the pattern elements look familiar from texts I've studied that predate current galactic civilization by thousands of years. This suggestion led to 3 days of intensive analysis, during which Zara and the communications team worked around the clock to apply historical linguistic principles to the alien transmission. What they discovered was both exciting and deeply unsettling. The signal was indeed a message, broadcast in a mathematical language that had been used by the same civilization that built the Echo network. Roughly translated, it said, "Survivors of the second Exodus requesting permission to enter safe harbor. Warning, pursuit craft detected. Immediate assistance required." The implications of this message sent shock waves through the investigation team. If the translation was accurate, then the object wasn't just an artifact from a dead civilization. It was a refugee ship carrying survivors from some kind of disaster, possibly running from enemies that might be just as dangerous as whatever they were fleeing. "The second Exodus," Dr. Vasquez muttered as she reviewed the translation for the 20th time. Does that phrase mean anything to anyone? Do we have any historical records that mention a first Exodus? Cale had been unusually quiet during the translation process, but now he spoke up with a theory that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. What if the first Exodus was the disaster that led to the creation of the Heart of Stars? What if these survivors are refugees from whatever catastrophe destroyed the civilization that once spanned multiple galaxies? The possibility that they were about to encounter beings who had survived the same cosmic disaster that had required the imprisonment of a galaxy-eating entity was both thrilling and terrifying. On one hand, such survivors might possess knowledge that could revolutionize their understanding of the universe. On the other hand, they might also be carrying dangers that current galactic civilization was completely unprepared to face. Captain Santos made the decision that would define the rest of their mission. We proceed with the interception as planned, but we maintain maximum defensive protocols. If these really are survivors from an ancient disaster, then we need to help them if possible. But we also need to be prepared for the possibility that they're not the only ones coming out of the void reaches. The interception took place in the empty space between 2 uninhabited star systems, far from any worlds that might be endangered if the encounter went badly. As the horizon approached the alien vessel, its sensors revealed details that made the object even more mysterious. The ship appeared to be grown rather than built, its hull formed from some kind of organic-looking material that pulsed with faint bioluminescent patterns. More disturbing was the evidence of damage, great tears in the hull that had been hastily repaired, and energy signatures that suggested the vessel had been in some kind of battle very recently. But most shocking of all was what their deep scans revealed about the ship's interior. There were life signs aboard the vessel, but not many. Whatever this ship had been designed to carry, most of its cargo or passengers were no longer alive. 3 distinct life signs, reported the sensor operator. All of them are weak, but stable. 2 appear to be in some kind of suspended animation, while the third is active but showing signs of extreme exhaustion. Captain Santos opened a communication channel to the alien vessel, broadcasting a standard first contact greeting in several languages, while the universal translator attempted to establish a communication protocol with the ship's systems. The response came almost immediately, transmitted in the same ancient mathematical language they had been analyzing for days. Dr. Vasquez worked frantically to translate the incoming message, her face growing pale as she decoded the alien words. "They're asking for sanctuary," she announced. "But they're also warning us that their pursuers are less than a day behind them, and that those pursuers consider any world that aids the refugees to be a legitimate target for complete destruction." The moral dilemma was immediate and stark. Helping the refugees would mean protecting them from enemies they knew nothing about, potentially putting entire civilizations at risk. But abandoning survivors from a cosmic catastrophe would violate every principle that the Galactic Exploration Service claimed to represent. Zara found herself thinking about the choices she had made during her quest for the Heart of Stars, and how those choices had shaped not just her own destiny, but the fate of everyone she cared about. Sometimes the most important decisions were the ones that required people to risk everything they had for principles they couldn't compromise. "We help them," she said quietly. "Whatever the cost, we help them. If their pursuers are as dangerous as they claim, then running away will only delay the inevitable anyway." Her words carried weight because of what everyone knew she had already sacrificed in the name of doing what was right. If someone who had given up ultimate power to prevent cosmic catastrophe thought the refugees deserved protection, then her opinion mattered more than any regulation or protocol. Captain Santos nodded slowly, making a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Open docking protocols," she commanded. "Bring them aboard, and prepare for anything." As the alien survivors were transferred to the horizon, Zara realized that her life had once again taken an unexpected turn. She had thought her days of dealing with cosmic mysteries were over, but the universe apparently had different plans. The refugees carried knowledge from a time when the galaxy was very different, and their pursuers represented a threat that no one in current civilization was prepared to face. But this time, she wouldn't be facing the unknown as a tool in someone else's plan. She would be confronting it as herself, backed by allies she trusted and motivated by principles she had chosen freely. The Barnacles were gone, along with their alien agenda, but her desire to understand the universe and protect the people she cared about was stronger than ever. The 3 survivors who came aboard the Horizon would soon reveal secrets that would challenge everything the current galactic community thought they knew about their place in the universe. And the enemies pursuing them would prove to be more dangerous and implacable than anything anyone had faced since the catastrophe that had ended the first age of galactic civilization. But Zara was no longer the uncertain young dragon who had fled Drakmor in search of purpose and power. She had found both, and in the process had learned that the most important battles were not fought for personal glory, but for the chance to preserve something worth preserving. The galaxy was about to need that lesson more than anyone realized.